once again to another episode of 177 Nations of Tasmania podcast. Malawi is a small, long, thin country in the heart of Africa. On its eastern side lies the majestic Lake Malawi, the third largest lake in Africa, stretching for 500 kilometres from north to south. The lake is a defining feature of the life and economy of this country of 19 million people. And it was by these shores of Lake Malawi that Mwase, my guest for this episode, was born and raised. As he grew up, he developed an interest in human rights and the wider world. Then meeting an Australian volunteer in Malawi and eventually marrying her led to a big move to Tasmania in the early 2000s. Now, anyone who was around in Tasmania at that time would know that there weren't exactly a lot of more dark-skinned faces around. And Mwase faced many challenges in adapting, including dealing with discrimination. However, his passion for human rights led to work in different roles in community care. And through this, he's incorporated his love for music. He's also been involved with numerous musical projects in and around Hobart, both playing gigs and doing workshops. But I'm just skimming the surface here. I'll leave it to Mwase to tell you the rest.
So I was brought up in a country called Malawi, but mainly the place that I grew up, it's along the lake, Lake Malawi. So it's called Senga Bay. So it's a big bay. There's lots of fishing, lots of water sports, skiing, scuba diving, bird watching, mountain hikes and all that, yeah.
And so is it a small place or a big town?
I would say it's a small place compared to Hobart.
And so mainly a kind of more of a rural lifestyle there?
We can say both because it's only an hour from the capital city, which is Lilongwe, the capital city of Malawi. Yeah, I mean that's mostly where everyone goes for their weekend holidays.
Okay, so it's like the opposite of here. People go to the city for the holidays. Here they go out of the city for the holidays.
Yeah.
And what did your family do there?
My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad worked as an engineer. And when he retired, he opened his own clothing company, so where he would make clothing. I suppose going to school, everyone appreciated going to access their education, which was very valuable and very important for us, coming from Malawi, which is a poor country because of some of the resources there were in terms of the way it is distributed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what sort of activities did you enjoy doing when you were a kid, or what were you involved in?
I suppose I enjoyed fishing, going in the canoes, swimming in the water in the Lake Malawi after school, snorkeling, playing a bit of soccer, and hanging out with friends, because everyone thinks had always been in peace, So, yeah, which sometimes we can take for granted. Yeah.
Should mention Lake Malawi. It's one of the biggest lakes in the world, isn't it? I think it might be the 10th.
It's the 10th, but it's the one of the, I think, the deepest lake. So Lake Malawi, it's about 100 k's wide and 540 kilometers long.
Wow, yeah.
And so I think the deepest point is about 1,000 meters deep. So it's got lots of cichlids, fish, so which you find in aquariums all over the world, as well as Australia, and it's got one of the many species of fishes. I think there's about 1,000 different types of fish. So mainly Lake Malawi, it's the source also for Malawians for income, and as well as food and also the water.
So growing up and going to school there, did you have any sort of aspiration or dream about what you thought you were going to do with your life?
Yes, I always wanted to do politics.
All right.
Which I didn't end up coming to, because in the end I thought that it wasn't so much injustice, but because I believe my belief is always about human rights. So, so I thought, when you become a politician, I think you're more like sold yourself, because you have to toe the lines of whichever party, even if you're independent, because you are voted by the people, and not everyone else agrees with some things. But if you're a leader, you have to bring everyone else together, regardless of if they don't agree with you or agree with you. Yes, so growing up, I always wanted to become a member of parliament in Malawi.
Okay.
But
And what motivated you, or what was the thing that drove that interest?
I always believed that I thought of doing good things for your community, so bringing in terms of community development. So, yeah, things that are most important to the areas or as well as the country where you come from, and to make changes for your communities. Yeah.
And was there anyone who like had inspired you or was a role model for you when you were young?
Not quite, no, but it's just something that I suppose I was good at school. So there are things that I was really good at: history, geography, and so when I looked at the world, I suppose the world that inspired me when I was young. One of my friends' dad had traveled to, they got a scholarship to study in Japan in the 90s, early 90s, 80s. So when he came back, he brought this new TV, and we were watching things from around the world, and as well as more like that sort of relate to traditional communities, indigenous and all that. So I thought, the world is out there. There's lots of us that we can do lots of different things. Yeah.
When you were thinking about this idea of being a politician, was there any particular issue or thing that you felt was important?
Yes. So it was all about also human rights. Yeah. So because we are coming from discourses of changes in terms of Malawi had a ruler who ruled the country for a long period. So these were times that things were going to also change. So we thought, you needed young generation, and I thought, yeah, I could be part of that change.
So when you were reaching the end of school, what was the plan? What were you going to do? And what did you do?
So I did move to the capital city. Then I traveled a lot around Malawi. I did some work with a guy from Germany who came in to do his PhD research in Malawi. So I worked with him with an organization called National Initiative for Civic Education. So we traveled around Malawi. Then after that, I finished that contract. Then I traveled to Tanzania, and then I met a couple of friends from Malawi, and then we decided to go home, did a bit more work, and then saved money. Then we just traveled. So we went to South Africa, Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe. So we got inspired backpacking. Then it was cheap, and it was easy, but not that everyone else could do the things that we did. We're just, open-minded young people that we thought that it's not just tourists coming from overseas, but we can do this too in Africa and experience the same things that everyone else experiences. So.
And traveling around to different countries in Africa, what differences did you notice between countries? I mean, did you think it was very different?
Yes, because the other countries, like going to Tanzania, it's because Africa is very multicultural, as you've been to Tanzania yourself, as you mentioned, Zanzibar. So when we went to Zanzibar, it's different to the south where we are coming from. We noticed that you had lots of more Arab influence in terms of the architecture and as well as their food influence. And going south from Malawi to Zambia, Mozambique, the difference there too, they had more of a Portuguese architecture, and also the language, because they speak Portuguese, so not understanding unless if you're speaking your local traditional Bantu or African languages. So that's the only way you would understand, as well as English for Malawians, for us, because we're British colonists. So that's the only language that we understand in that region. But it's different to when you go to Mozambique or Tanzania, and the accent and the way people do things too. It's totally different.
Yeah, it's a good point actually, because I think a lot of people here sort of see Africa as one thing when it's actually a very diverse.
Yes, it's very diverse, because if you go to Tanzania, there's you see that there's lots of people from the Middle East, I'd say, and as well as the Far East, which is India and all that. Same as in Malawi, we had lots of Indians, or if you go to South Africa. And if you go the south, there will be more Caucasians than going to East Africa.
So you went backpacking around Africa, and what do you feel you learnt from that experience? Did that change you in any way?
Yes, it changed me dramatically. But I've always appreciated the world, and I always wanted to go out there. And during those times, I met lots of young Australian backpackers, Kiwis, people from all over the world. So when you went to the campground, you meet lots of people from all over the world, which was very easy because things like that, it's not that easy to do it now, where you'd think in this 21st century to be more global and easy, but it's a little bit more dangerous than traveling in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, because everyone else did not mind about what someone else is doing or where you're coming from. It was just easy. You could just camp anywhere. No one bothered sort of in that way. But yes, it changed me dramatically, and that's why I appreciated more of the world much, and I knew that there's lots out there, and that's what inspired me. Yeah.
Well, it seems like a good segue to ask you about what brought you to Australia and Tasmania.
So coming to Tasmania, I met my ex-wife. She was living in Malawi as a teacher at a Catholic school. So she came as Commonwealth countries would do, as well as Australia did. You had Australian International, Volunteers International. So lots of young men like yourself, when your young times, you finish university, you'd go and work.
Thanks for calling me young. Anyway.
Yes, yeah. So when you finish universities, and these are also the good times we're talking about too. So Australia would send, every year would send 15 or 20 young men and women to go and work in countries such as Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe as volunteers. So this would be at maybe through United Nations, World Health Organization, or as young doctors or teachers, engineers or builders. So all sorts of different skills that young men and women of Australia would go. But yeah, that's how I met my ex-wife. So she was working in the capital city. I was working in Lilongwe. So I believe I went out with my friends to a bar. It was more like an expatriate bar. And then I met her there and had a chat, and then we left it like that. And then one day we saw each other again, and we invited each other for lunch and then dinner, and then we ended up dating.
How did it go from that to come to Australia?
So to go from that, so we did travel. We went to Mozambique, and we went to Zambia, then came back to Malawi. So we thought we wanted to take this further. So she did invite me because this was her last year in Malawi. So she did invite me to come to Australia, as I knew my friends were living in Sydney, Perth and Melbourne. So I had friends living in Australia already. So it was a big call for me because I had to leave everything behind and start a new life. And it was very scary too. And because I didn't know Tasmania well, and everyone else, and I have friends from Australia too, said, you can't move to Tasmania. Everyone there gets married with their sisters, and it's, yes. Yeah, so I thought, I'll give it a shot. So yes, so we started the process of the visa for myself to migrate to Australia, which took about, so she left, she came back to Australia, then I moved to South Africa. So I lived in Pretoria for 7 months while I applied for my visa, then went back to Malawi, then went back to Johannesburg again for a few months, and then as I was coming back to Malawi, I received a phone call from the Australian High Commission in Pretoria. So I was very excited but very nervous, and that was my process to moving to Tasmania. Yeah. the year that I had arrived was 13th June, and it was the coldest in 20 years or something. So I went to bed. I had my thermos on. I was still shaking. I had the blanket, the electric blanket on, and it was different because in Sydney you could see lots of other different migrants, or people of color and all that. But when I came to Tasmania, this is early 2000. Yeah, so it was all just very white.
Yeah, no.
So it was different to the interstate. So I thought, this is very different. And it was very hard too, But that was my first impression, yes.
And what were maybe the biggest challenges for you to try and overcome in the first phase of living here?
I think the weather, employment, and discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
So there is lots of discrimination in terms of getting employment, and the food also. So and not having lots of communities that you could relate to or to get inspired. That I'm not.
Yep.
It's not just me here. I'm not alone. There's lots of other different nationalities or people that are, regardless of the color of their skin. But so there were the challenges.
How did you go about trying to find work, for example?
I got introduced from a number of people that are in that connections with my ex-wife's friends and people they went to school with. And I also made that effort myself to sort of get out there, because where I was coming from, we grew up with all sorts of different people. So it wasn't about, it's just, I was just inspired and driven, to be myself, and that I'm part of everyone else here. So if I'm going to get a job, I have to be out there myself. So.
And what was the first job you did in Tasmania?
I think the first job I did was I was working in a bar and restaurant, which was very hard for lots of migrants, to get then, coming from Africa,
But I suppose that can be a good way to meet people, I guess.
That's where I connected myself too, yes. That was the biggest connections to the community and to be part of the community,
And so what did you learn from doing that?
I learned about, I suppose, the culture, and I suppose the language, even though I'm coming from a British colony, but, there's some accents, and each country has got a way of doing things too, so I had to adapt to that and to be part of that.
Was it easy for you to adapt to some of these things, or did it take a bit of time?
It took a bit of time, but I suppose it's more of a confidence, like regardless of where you go. If you're a confident person, then things might be easy. But it was really hard. I suppose the real hard is more of accepting myself for who I am and embracing that because of the discrimination that I faced living in Australia, and as well as especially Tasmania, which has changed a lot to now.
Yeah, because back in 2002, 2003, there wouldn't have been very many African. I think maybe that was when some Sudanese were arriving.
Yes, there were refugees and humanitarian. So there were from Congo, Sierra Leone, Ethiopia, or Somalia, Liberia, Sudan. Yeah, there were lots of humanitarian refugees that were here. And for myself, I had a different sort of experience, to what they had seen, and to the reason that I migrated here. So it would have been easy for me because my partner was my ex-wife was from here. So my connections and people that I was surrounded with was different to different isolation where you're coming from camps or places where you're just being displaced. Yeah, so we had a different feelings, but also it was hard for me to connect to that community too.
But in terms of discrimination, could you give me an example of where you experienced discrimination, and how did you deal with that?
I dealt with that by being resilient, I suppose, because I knew that there's certain part of our community had not traveled or been anywhere, or I suppose some meant it and some did not mean it, or I suppose some is just a peer pressure from their friends, because I remember walking in the street. I used to live here in North Hobart on Feltham Street, so we lived here and also Newtown when I first moved here. They were our first two houses. So on the way going to work, I'd be called nigger, or go back to where you come from, or being thrown ice cream. I used to have long hair, long dreads, I suppose. Yeah, or Bob Marley, and thrown water, and so I've had all that, thrown water, ice cream. I mean, even going to work with your work colleagues, discriminate you and all that. So yeah, it was part of the experience, but it's being resilient that not everyone else is like that, and acknowledging that not everyone else sees myself that way. But then also, yeah, for me being there, it was part of the education for them to know that there are other people that look different than us, but yeah, we are part of this planet.
Yeah. And I guess back at that time you would have stood out a bit more.
Yes, of course, that's true.
Now if you go into North Hobart, you see everybody, you see all the
from all over the world. That which is really happy, which makes me happy, because now I can sit down and say that phew, at least at last, free at last, because then it's not just me enjoying it, but other people. But we also fought that system of change in Hobart with other communities who are benefiting and embracing that. Yeah.
And so you worked in a bar for a while, but that's not really a career, is it? So how did you get into your current career?
So I did some studies again here to sort of fit in. So at first I wanted to work in a community development again, so I did some volunteer with Amnesty International. Then I had to further other courses at TAFE, where I did some number of diplomas, and then I worked in drug and alcohol counseling and education to young people. So I traveled a lot in the southern Tasmania in schools, running programs. Then I worked for city councils, so Clan City Council. Then I went back to the community service sector. So I worked with an organization supporting, so as a family support worker, so supporting families with reunification of their children who were taken by child safety. So I've been doing that, and as well as working in mental health and disability. So I've been doing that since then. Yeah.
And what would you say is the biggest thing that you've learned from all that? Because you've had the opportunity to meet a lot of different people in the Tasmanian community.
Yeah. What I've learned, it's more of that, regardless of your color of skin, but as society and as community and as people, we all face the same issues. Could be mental health, could be homelessness, or could be access to education and access to things that we take for granted. So regardless of and the resources, so regardless of your color of your skin, but we all experience same issues. So that's what I've learned, because I always thought that in developed countries, if you're coming from developing countries, or what we call, if you are from developed countries, that means you've got no issues at all. There's no problems. Everyone is all in peace, and they've got access to everything. But then that opened my eyes to realize that there's lots of discourses, there's lots of people going through lots of difficulties. Not that because you're coming from Australia and then it's a land of honey and gold,
Yeah. I mean, we have more things available around us, but people can...
It's the way it is distributed, and and how you get that access, because some people might know how to access certain things, and other people might have limited education and limited influence on how to access certain things that we all take for granted. Because if you live in certain part or area in a greater Hobart, you might not have enough access to see a GP than someone else who lives in the city.
And really important thing to ask you about is about music, because that's a big part of your life.
Yes.
Isn't it? So how did you, maybe I'll let you explain what kind of music you do and how did you get into it?
So I started music in Malawi with my friends. So we were just using pots and pans. Then we made traditional drums and percussion and guitars made from, those 5-liter olive oil gallons. And
Okay.
yeah, so currently I play in a band called Mambo Afro Trio. So Matthew, one of the gentlemen that I play with, he got inspired from that, made a guitar from that. But going back to where I started, so in Australia, when I moved to Tasmania, with the difficulties of being accepted and acknowledged, so I met 3 young ladies. One was from Ghana, 4 actually. One was from Ghana, one from Sierra Leone, and another gentleman from Sierra Leone, and 2 young women from Rwanda. They had came here as humanitarian refugee. So we were facing the difficulties of discrimination. So we got asked. We formed a group, a dance group and music, and also a couple guys. There's another young man then. From Tazi, and 2 other girls, Anglo from Tasmania. So we formed a group called the Tribes. So what we did then, we went in all schools around Tasmania to advocate for ourselves that we are the tribe, sort of, worked with young people then that now would be like 35 or 40, So that's the same thing we're talking before. So we went to primary schools, high schools, and colleges and universities. We sort of did our dance and worked with everyone else through workshops, building relationships, communication with the new emerging Tasmania. So yeah, that's how I started my music. So everyone else, the majority of people left. So then I worked with a number of different bands in Hobart, and Republic Bar was mainly the venue for us then. That was the only biggest venue where we did our gigs, So yeah, so I worked with a number of guys with reggae bands, Afrobeat music, and then started from there. So since I've been here, I've always involved in lots of guys, but as well as in inspiring, all sorts of migrant and communities. When they saw that, they knew that there is also an acceptance and also hunger for all sorts of different communities to showcase the traditional and culture and share that as Australia as a migrant country. So yeah, so I've worked with a number of guys from, I suppose, from all over the world, I would say, yeah.
So it's not just about the music; it's also an aspect of your community work as well.
It was also aspect of community work, because the more I knew that there's lots of us at that stage, people from, might be from, I've worked with people from Mongolia or from Iran or from South America, from the Middle East, from New Zealand, and so all sorts of different, so knowing that, it's not just, but it's also bridging that gap and embracing all other type of traditions of music and the way of doing the arts in music.
So you've also done something with Tasmanian Aboriginal musicians?
Yes. So I've worked with Brothers of Country. So I've worked with lots of different communities to sort of bridge that gap. So where we've applied funding through the Arts Council of Australia, and also communities like Greenock City Council, Hobart City Council, and other anthropologists who sort of happen to fund us to work with lots of different sort of communities, but as well as the traditional owners from this country. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's always been my inspiration, because as a kid, going back, as I was saying to you, like when I saw this movie, they were all sort of different things that we were watching from all over the world that inspired me. I thought, there are other people there, they look like us, mm-hmm. Like, they look like me. I'm like, if they can do that, then that means I can do that. So, but my belief is always about human rights. It's bringing people from and working with people from all sorts of corners of the world, regardless of where you're coming from, but also being fascinated and curious about what sort of music do they play. If we can bring that together, then yeah. So currently we've been playing for guys from Nepal and India. So we sort of my music is more of world music. So it's sort of listening to all sorts of different sounds from all over the world and encompassing that the building music together with the guys that we work with.
And you have a family here, I believe?
Yes.
You must have some kids because you said you're going to the
yes. So my oldest was born in 2006. She just turned 18 this this April. That's how I experienced. Yeah. Then I had 2 boys and a younger daughter. So yeah, I've got 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. Yeah.
And so they've been brought up in Tasmania.
Yeah. So both their moms, both the moms are from here, and they've been brought up here.
And so, how much of your own culture have you been able to impart or communicate to them, and how much of an interest do they have in it?
As they grew up, they've grown up, they've connected more to my culture, but also, I suppose the impact, it's more of them growing up in the way I do things.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of food, might be art, for them coming along to the art and the music stuff that I've done, but food and clothing and the language a little bit for me, for them, I suppose. Yeah, that's what but also for them being born, that's part of their the influence that seeing the both. Yeah.
And do you still have lots of contact with your family in Malawi? Or
yes. Yeah. So yeah, and my children talk to them too. Yeah. So I've got a brother and 3 sisters there. Yeah.
And are there any particular values or traditions that you learned from your upbringing that you would like your kids to have as well?
I suppose the values that I believe it's about human rights and engaging my children. They're very good with that, respecting other people, caring for other people, and they're the values, and also being easy to yourself, as I've always been to my children. I suppose that's what also we learned from our the values that I learned from both mom and dad is that if you dropped a plate, it's broken, you don't shout. Like they never yelled, "Oh, what have you done that for?" So they never said anything. So I've brought up those values, but it's just encouraging that when they come to me, that Dad, look, I've done this, and just putting back to them that it's not about me. That's yours. They're your things too. Because if you break it, then we don't have. We don't have it anymore. So it's not. Yeah. So they're the values that sort of I've always encouraged my children that it's not about. It's more about responsibility. Yeah, it's more about what you're gonna do. Yeah, if that's not there, if that's broken, yeah, it's not about yelling or shouting at the children, yeah, or being angry to them that shouldn't have done that. You've done, yeah. It was so they're the values that I've always grown up, and I'm hoping that my children are going to have the same values if they ever have their own children or yeah.
How would you rate the local people's knowledge of, well, not just Malawi, but because I'm sure they don't know much, but just the Africans' culture generally, and how much has it changed since you've been here?
It's changed a lot. I think it's more of because lots of Australian community, lots of Australian always travelled. Like for me, growing up as a 12-year-old in Malawi, like I met lots and lots of Australians, so lots of Australian young people. I've met lots of people here that have been to Malawi, lots of Tasmanians that have been to Malawi. But what's changed? I suppose now the world is more connected because we've got social media and all that, where we also have to be careful because we think that that's what we know of Africa, but rather than talking to us, the community that are here, to learn from each other and share the life experiences. But it has changed. The discrimination, most people understand, but I suppose the only challenge is it's more of what is shared in the social media, and also the broadcasting, and also some of our politicians, where they use some communities when they need them for their votes and all that it flares and flares up, and everyone else thinks that that's what these communities are. That's what these communities are, and also the changes of with the media in terms of because we do understand there's lots of social injustice in terms of mental health, where it affects all sorts of different people regardless of where you're coming from, or religious or culture or color. And then when someone else does that same experience that episode, if you are different colors, sort of flares up in the media that this is what these people are, but not all of them are like that. So that's the only way we need to be careful and sort of address that we all experience lots of. But yes, to answer your question, there's lots of things have changed, but there's other things that are it's very hard to change because it happens all over the world.
There's always a tendency for people to stereotype and to see people as just a group rather than a group of individuals. Which this is sort of part of my aim with the podcast, is by getting personal stories, I hope that people will see individuals, and that we all have things in common. We all have things that are different. And I think when you connect with somebody from a different race or culture on an individual level, then the things that you thought were a problem, they just simply disappear, and you realize, this guy.
It's not. It's just we are all just peace loving. We just want to have fun. We just want to eat that same sandwich, or go for a walk, or have a beer, like if everyone else, regardless of what people think that that's who they are.